The stars looked different when you knew war was coming. Captain Daewon stood on the bridge of the Times Eternal Horizon asterisk, watching the view screen display thousands of distant lights. Somewhere out there, 300 alien warships waited at the border. Somewhere behind him, Earth scrambled to assemble a fleet that wouldn't arrive in time. "Captain, we're receiving the broadcast again," said Navigator Taeyang from his station. The young man's fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, but his voice carried an edge of worry. Daewon nodded. "Put it through." The message played for the 15th time since they'd intercepted it 6 hours ago. A deep, resonating voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfectly translated human language. The Talvesh Dominion demanded humanity's withdrawal from 6 star systems. They gave Earth 72 hours. The alternative was complete annihilation. "They're not bluffing," Dr. Hana said from the science station. She pulled up a holographic display showing the alien fleet composition. 300 warships. Our intelligence suggests each one is twice the size of our largest cruisers. They have weapons we've never seen before. Engineer Bo-Ra leaned against the doorway, her arms crossed. "So basically, we're looking at the biggest military force humanity has ever faced. And our nearest battle group is 3 weeks away." "That's about right," Daewon confirmed. He turned to face his crew. 43 people, all looking to him for guidance. The Times Eternal Horizon Times was a research vessel, designed for deep space exploration and scientific study. They carried no heavy weapons, no military-grade shields, no battalion of soldiers. They had laboratories, survey equipment, and a crew of scientists and engineers. Taeyang spoke up. "Command sent new orders, Captain. We're to retreat to the Proxima station immediately and await the fleet's arrival." Daewon had read those orders. He'd read them 3 times, actually, making sure he understood exactly what Earth Command wanted. They wanted the Times Eternal Horizon Times to run, to hide, to let the Talavesh sit unchallenged at the border while humanity scrambled to mount a defense. He understood the logic. One research ship couldn't make a difference against 300 warships. It would be suicide to approach them. The smart thing, the sensible thing, was to retreat and preserve the ship and crew for whatever came next. But Daewon had spent 20 years in the military before becoming an exploration captain. He'd studied strategy, tactics, and the psychology of warfare, and he knew something that Earth Command, sitting safe in their offices billions of kilometers away, didn't seem to grasp. Wars weren't just won with weapons and numbers. Sometimes, they were won before the first shot was ever fired. "What are you thinking, Captain?" Hana asked. She knew him well enough to recognize that look in his eyes. Daewon walked to the navigation console and brought up a star map. The Talvesh fleet sat in the Kepler 442 system, right at the border between their territory and humanity's expanding settlements. The Times Eternal Horizon Times was currently 7 light-years away, having just completed a survey of an uninhabited system. "How long would it take us to reach Kepler 442? He asked. Taeyang's eyes widened. "Captain, we can't." "How long?" The navigator ran the calculations. 18 hours, at maximum jump speed. "But sir, the orders clearly state." "I know what the orders state." Daewon turned to face his crew again. "I also know what the Talvesh are expecting. They sent that ultimatum to Earth, thinking we'd respond with everything we have. They're waiting for a fleet. They're prepared for a massive military confrontation." Bo-Ra straightened up. "And if we show up instead? One research ship? They'll be confused," Hana said slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "They won't know what to make of it." "Exactly." Daewon pulled up images of the Talvesh that human intelligence had gathered. They were a large species, heavily built, with thick armored skin and powerful limbs. Their culture valued strength and military might above all else. They'd conquered 17 other species through overwhelming force. "They think like conquerors," Daewon continued. "They expect us to think the same way. Send our biggest ships, our strongest weapons, our largest armies. But what if we don't? What if we send something they can't understand or predict? A research vessel, Taeyang said quietly. Not just any research vessel. This research vessel. With this crew. Daewon looked at each of them in turn. I've served with most of you for 5 years. I know what you're capable of. Hana, you've developed theories that changed how we understand quantum mechanics. Bora, you've fixed catastrophic system failures with nothing but spare parts and sheer stubbornness. Taeyang, you can navigate gravitational fields that would tear apart most pilots. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Talvesh have never encountered humanity before. They don't know what we can do. They don't know how we think, and they definitely don't know that our scientists and explorers can be just as dangerous as our soldiers when they need to be. You want to bluff them, Hana said. I want to show them the truth, Daewon corrected. That humanity doesn't need a fleet to make a statement. That we're not like the other species they've conquered. That underestimating us is a mistake they'll regret. Bora let out a low whistle. That's insane. Probably. We could start a war. They've already started it by threatening us. We just need to make them reconsider finishing it. Silence filled the bridge. Daewon knew what he was asking. If they approached the Talvesh fleet, there was a very real chance they'd be destroyed before they could say a word. Even if the aliens listened, there was no guarantee his plan would work. They could be sacrificing themselves for nothing, but he also knew that sometimes, the impossible gesture was the only one that mattered. I won't order anyone to do this, Daewon said quietly. If we go together. Willingly. If you want to follow command's orders and retreat, I'll understand. We'll put it to a vote. Taeyang was the first to speak. I'm in. This is the stupidest thing I've ever agreed to, Bora said with a grin. Count me in, Hana nodded. Someone needs to keep you all alive. One by one, the crew members voiced their support. Some looked terrified. Others seemed excited. But all of them trusted their captain. Daewon felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. 43 lives now depended on a plan that existed mostly in his head. A plan that required perfect execution, incredible luck, and the hope that the Talvesh could be impressed rather than simply enraged. Taeyang, set course for Kepler 442. Maximum speed. Yes, sir. Bora, I need you to start working on some modifications to our systems. Creative modifications. The engineer's grin widened. I like the sound of that, Hana. Start analyzing everything we know about Talvesh psychology and culture. I need to understand how they think. Already on it. The Time's Eternal Horizon Times turned in space, its engines flaring to life. The research vessel, designed for peaceful exploration of the cosmos, set course for the largest alien armada humanity had ever encountered. Daewon looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere ahead, the Talvesh waited for a fleet. They were going to be very surprised. 18 hours gave them just enough time to prepare, and not nearly enough time to think about how badly this could go wrong. Bora worked without sleep, her fingers dancing across control panels as she reconfigured systems that were never meant to be pushed beyond their limits. The engine room became her kingdom, and she ruled it with coffee and creative cursing. The reactor can handle maybe 300% capacity, she explained to Daewon when he checked on her progress. Any higher, and we risk a meltdown. But if we route power through the secondary systems and use the research equipment as buffers, I can make the energy signature look much bigger than it actually is. How much bigger? Big enough that their sensors will think we're a heavy cruiser instead of a research vessel. She wiped sweat from her forehead. Of course, if they scan us too closely, they'll see through it immediately. Then we'll have to make sure they don't get the chance. In the science lab, Hana surrounded herself with holographic displays showing everything humanity knew about the Talvesh. It wasn't much. The species had only made contact with human space 3 months ago, demanding territory that humanity had already begun settling. They're aggressive but not stupid, Hana told the captain during a briefing. Every species they've conquered, they studied first. They learned their enemy's strengths and weaknesses before attacking. The problem is, they've never encountered anyone who fought back effectively, because everyone else tried to match them, ship for ship, weapon for weapon, Day One said. Exactly. The Talvesh are bigger, stronger, and have better technology. Playing their game means losing. Hana pulled up a comparison chart. But they have no experience with unpredictability. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and straightforward tactics. So we do the opposite. We do everything they don't expect. Taeyang spent his hours plotting impossible navigation routes through the asteroid field that surrounded Kepler 442. The young navigator's reputation came from his ability to see paths where others saw only chaos. Now, he needed to find routes that would seem absolutely insane to any observer. I've mapped 17 different trajectories, he reported to Day One. Each one threads through gaps that our computer says are too narrow for a ship this size. The computer is probably right. Well, technically there's enough space. The margins are just very, very thin. A few meters at most. Vote. Day One studied the routes. And you can fly these? Taeyang's hands trembled slightly, but his voice stayed steady. Yes, sir. I can fly them. The hours counted down. The crew prepared in their own ways. Some wrote letters to loved ones back on Earth, just in case. Others checked and rechecked their stations, finding comfort in routine. A few gathered in the common area, sharing stories and nervous laughter. Day One walked through the ship, talking to each crew member. He owed them that much. They were following him into danger based on nothing but trust and a half-formed plan. The least he could do was look each of them in the eye and make sure they knew their captain understood the risk. When the Time's Eternal Horizon times finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, the Talvesh fleet was waiting exactly where intelligence said it would be. 300 warships hung in space like a swarm of metal predators. Each one bristled with weapons and armor. Their formation was perfect, disciplined, speaking to centuries of military tradition. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, monuments to the art of destruction. They've detected us, Taeyang reported. Multiple targeting locks activating. Hold position. Broadcast on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocols. The view screen flickered, and suddenly, Day One was looking at Admiral Korthak of the Talvesh Dominion. The alien was massive, easily twice the size of a human, with thick, armored plates covering his body. His eyes were cold and calculating. I am Admiral Korthak, Supreme Commander of the Dominion Fleet. Identify yourself. 1. Captain Day One of the human vessel Time's Eternal Horizon ***. We received your message to Earth. Korthak's expression was difficult to read, but Day One thought he detected confusion. You are alone. Where is your fleet? We don't need a fleet. Silence stretched between them. The Admiral leaned forward slightly, studying the human on his screen. You are either very brave or very foolish, Captain. One ship cannot stand against the might of the Dominion. We're not here to stand against you, Admiral. We're here to have a conversation. A conversation. Korthak's tone suggested he found the idea absurd. Your species has 72 hours to withdraw from disputed territory. There is nothing to discuss. Day One kept his voice calm and level. I disagree. I think there's a great deal to discuss. For instance, you've never faced humanity in battle before. You don't know what we're capable of. We have studied your vessels. We know your technology. You are no match for the Dominion. Have you studied us, though? Really studied us? Day One stood up, moving closer to the view screen. You've looked at our ships, our weapons, our military strength. But have you looked at what makes humanity dangerous? Korthak's eyes narrowed. Speak plainly. Human. I'm offering you a demonstration. Give me 1 hour. Let me show you what this single ship can do. If you're not impressed, you can destroy us. and continue with your invasion. But if we surprise you, if we show you something you didn't expect, then perhaps you'll reconsider your ultimatum." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Day One could see the calculation happening behind those alien eyes. Korthok was trying to understand the angle, the trick, the trap. He was looking for the logical military reason why a single research vessel would approach his fleet. "Why would I agree to this?" Korthok finally asked. "Because you're curious. Because in all your conquests, you've never encountered a species that responded like this. Because refusing means you'll always wonder if you made a mistake." Day One smiled slightly. "And because what's 1 hour to someone who controls 300 warships? If I'm bluffing, you lose nothing. If I'm not, you gain valuable intelligence about your enemy." Korthok considered this. Day One could see the logic working on him. The Admiral commanded overwhelming force. One human ship posed no real threat. And if the humans were foolish enough to reveal their capabilities, it would only help the Dominion plan their invasion more effectively. 1 hour, Korthok said finally. "Impress me, Captain Day One. Show me why I should fear a single research vessel." The screen went dark. Day One turned to his crew. Every eye on the bridge was watching him. "All hands to stations. Bo-Ra, bring the reactor up to maximum output. Hana, prepare the gravitational demonstration we discussed. Taeyang, are you ready?" The navigator pulled up his impossible roots. His hands were steady now, focused completely on the task ahead. "Ready, sir. Then let's show them what humanity can do." Day One sat down in the captain's chair. "Remember, we're not trying to beat them. We're trying to make them understand that fighting us would cost more than they're willing to pay." The Time's Eternal Horizon Times moved forward, heading directly toward the asteroid field that the Talvesh fleet carefully avoided. Sensors aboard 300 warships tracked the small human vessel, expecting it to curve around the danger zone. Instead, Taeyang aimed straight into the heart of the chaos. "Beginning approach run," the navigator said calmly. "This is going to be interesting. This is going to be interesting." On the Talvesh flagship, alarms began to sound as computers calculated what the human ship was attempting. The trajectory was impossible. No sane pilot would try it. Admiral Korthok leaned forward in his command throne, watching with growing interest. The demonstration had begun. The asteroid field around Kepler 442 was a graveyard of broken planets, a dense maze of tumbling rocks ranging from pebbles to mountains. Most ships gave it a wide berth, adding hours to their travel time rather than risk the unpredictable chaos within. Taeyang flew straight into it at speeds that made the hull groan in protest. "Contact in 3 seconds, he said, his voice absolutely calm. 2. 1. The Time's Eternal Horizon Times slipped between two asteroids with less than 5 meters clearance on either side. The ship banked hard left, then immediately rolled right, threading through gaps that shouldn't have existed. Taeyang's hands moved across the controls like he was playing an instrument, each movement precise and deliberate. On the Talvesh flagship, Admiral Korthok watched in silence. His tactical officer spoke up, voice tight with stress. "Sir, their speed is increasing. Their trajectory puts them on a collision course with at least 15 major obstacles. How are they tracking so many variables at once?" another officer asked. "Our computers can barely plot safe routes through that field at a quarter that speed." Korthok said nothing. He simply watched as the human ship danced through certain death like it was a gentle breeze. Inside the Time's Eternal Horizon asterisk, the crew felt every turn, every acceleration, every heart-stopping near miss. But Taeyang showed no fear. He saw the path like it was painted in light, following mathematical certainties that existed only in his mind. "Coming up on the narrow passage," he announced. "This is going to be close." Ahead, 3 asteroids formed a triangular gap, barely wider than the ship itself. The opening rotated slowly as the rocks tumbled through space. Timing would be everything. Taeyang didn't slow down. He accelerated. The time's eternal horizon times shot through the gap with centimeters to spare. The asteroid's gravity fields tugged at the hull. But the navigator had calculated for that, using the pull to slingshot them forward even faster. "We're through the field," Tae-young reported. 37 seconds. Start to finish. New record. On 300 Talavesh warships, sensor operators stared at their screens in disbelief. Several ships had tried to follow the human vessel's path with their tracking systems, and all of them had lost the lock. The maneuvers were too fast, too complex, too precise. "Phase 1 complete," Daewon said. "Hana, you're up." Dr. Hana activated the equipment she'd been preparing. The time's eternal horizon times carried sophisticated scientific instruments designed to study gravitational anomalies, measure quantum fluctuations, and probe the deepest mysteries of space. She'd spent the last 18 hours figuring out how to weaponize them, targeting the Talvesh destroyer formation at Mark 347, Hana said. Initiating gravitational pulse. The research vessel's main sensor array lit up with energy. A focused beam of precisely calibrated gravitational force shot out, invisible but incredibly powerful. It struck the space between 3 Talvesh destroyers that had maintained a tight defensive formation. Suddenly, local gravity went sideways. The 3 warships lurched out of position, pulled toward each other by forces that shouldn't exist. Their pilots fought to compensate, firing maneuvering thrusters to break free. It took them nearly a minute to regain their previous positions. Admiral Korthak's tactical officer looked shaken. "They could have crushed our ships together," Korthak finished. "Yes, I'm aware." Hana's voice came over the open channel. "That was set to approximately 1% power. We use stronger pulses to study black holes. Just so you know." The Talvesh fleet stirred uneasily. They were beginning to realize that the small human ship wasn't helpless. Worse, it was toying with them. "Bora, show them what you've been working on," Daewon ordered. "In engineering." Bora grinned. She'd been waiting for this. Reactor, output climbing. 100%. 150. 200. The time's eternal horizons times energy signature began to grow. On Talvesh sensors, the small research vessel suddenly looked much larger. The power readings climbed higher and higher, far beyond what a ship that size should be able to generate. 250%, 300, 320, 340. Warning alarms filled the Talvesh flagship. Officers shouted readings at Admiral Korthak, their voices rising with each new number. The human ship was generating enough power to match some of their heavy cruisers. "How is that possible?" the tactical officer demanded. "Their reactor should have melted down by now." Bora's voice crackled over the channel. "Human engineering tolerances are a bit different from yours. Our safety margins are more like suggestions. This is 340% capacity. For your reference, human warships have survived combat at 600% during emergency situations." She paused for effect. "We haven't even started trying yet." The engineering officer on the Talvesh flagship ran the calculations 3 times, certain he'd made a mistake. He hadn't. If the humans were telling the truth, their reactors could output nearly double what Talvesh technology could achieve, and their engineers considered this routine. "The readings are consistent, Admiral," the officer reported quietly. "They're not bluffing about the power output." Korthak's expression remained neutral. But inside, doubt began to form. This was not how conquered species behaved. This was not how inferior technology performed. Something was wrong with the Dominion's understanding of humanity. "One more thing," Daewon said. "We're broadcasting our biometric data now. I think you'll find it interesting." Across the fleet, Talvesh medical officers pulled up the incoming data stream. What they saw made no sense. The human crew's vital signs showed elevated heart rates and increased adrenaline. Typical stress responses to danger. But the levels were controlled, almost casual. The humans were terrified, but functioning perfectly. "Compare to our own crews," Korthak ordered. The difference was stark. Talvesh heart rates had spiked dramatically when the human ship performed its impossible maneuvers. Stress hormones flooded their systems. Several crew members showed signs of near panic. The humans who had actually performed those maneuvers? Slightly elevated vitals. Tae Yang, the pilot who'd threaded through the asteroid field at insane speeds, showed a heart rate barely above resting. They're not even worried. A Talvesh medical officer whispered. To them, this is normal. Bo-Ra's voice came over the channel again, sounding almost bored. So here's the thing about humans. We're really good at operating in conditions that would kill most species. High stress, impossible odds, equipment pushed past any reasonable limits. We kind of thrive on it. She paused, and when she spoke again, there was steel in her voice. And this is a research vessel. We're scientists and explorers. Imagine what our actual soldiers are like. The Talvesh fleet hung in space, 300 warships strong. And for the first time in their military history, they hesitated. The calculations were clear. They had overwhelming numerical superiority. They had better weapons, stronger armor, more advanced shields. But the humans had just demonstrated something the Talvesh had never encountered. The ability to turn anything into a weapon, the skill to perform impossible maneuvers as routine, and the psychological conditioning to treat mortal danger as just another day at work. Captain Day 1, Admiral Korthok said slowly, you have made your point. Your ship is impressive. Your crew is skilled. But you are still only one vessel. Against 300. What do you hope to accomplish? Day 1 stood up, facing the view screen. I'm not here to accomplish anything, Admiral. I'm here to make you understand something. You've conquered 17 species. All of them fought you the same way, trying to match your strength with theirs. It didn't work, because you're better at that game. He stepped closer to the camera. But humanity doesn't play games we can't win. We change the rules instead. You want to invade our territory? Fine. But understand what that means. Every human ship you face, from research vessels to garbage haulers to colony transports, can be turned into a weapon. Every human crew, from scientists to merchants to children, will fight you with whatever they have. Daewon's voice grew harder. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. We improvise. We adapt. And we turn our weaknesses into strengths. You're not facing a fleet, Admiral. You're facing a species that went from wooden boats to faster-than-light travel in 300 years. A species that split the atom before leaving their home planet. A species that thrives on impossible challenges. Levenling that is 9. Levenling that ported are. A species that thrives on impossible challenges. He let that sink in. So, ask yourself, is the territory you're demanding worth fighting an enemy like that? Because this is just one research ship. Imagine 1,000 warships crewed by people who think like us. The bridge of the Talvesh flagship was completely silent. Every officer stared at their admiral, waiting for his response. Admiral Korthok looked at the small human vessel on his screen. One ship, 43 crew members, no heavy weapons, no military shields, just brilliant engineering, incredible skill, and the kind of fearless creativity that came from a species that saw impossible as a challenge rather than a barrier. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Korthok felt something unfamiliar. He felt uncertain. Admiral Korthok requested a private communication channel. Day 1 accepted, and suddenly, the two commanders faced each other across the vast distance of space, with no audience but themselves. You are either the bravest being I have ever encountered, or the most foolish, Korthok said. His voice was different now, less formal, more genuine. I have not decided which. Maybe both, Day 1 replied. In my experience, brave and foolish often look the same until you know how things end. The Admiral made a sound that might have been laughter. A fair point. He leaned back in his command throne. I have studied your species, Captain. We have files on human expansion, your technology, your military capabilities. Nothing in those files suggested you would respond like this. What did you expect? Fleet movements, military posturing, defensive formations around your colonies. Korthok gestured at his own ships. A response proportional to the threat. That is how warfare works. That is how every species we have encountered has responded. And that's why you've conquered all of them, Day One said. You know how to fight that kind of war. You're very good at it. But you are not fighting that war. No. We're fighting a different war entirely. One where the goal isn't to destroy your fleet. We both know we couldn't do that. The goal is to make you understand that destroying us would cost more than you're willing to pay. Korthok was quiet for a moment. Explain. Day One pulled up a holographic display between them. You've been watching our colony ships, our trade vessels, our exploration craft. You've analyzed our weapons, our ships, our defenses. All external things. But you haven't looked at what makes humanity dangerous, which is our nature. Day One brought up data from Earth's history. Admiral, let me tell you about my species. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us at every turn. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, ice ages. We were weak compared to most other creatures. No claws, no armor, no venom. We should have died out. He pulled up images of early human civilization. But we didn't. We learned to make tools. We learned to use fire. We learned to work together. And most importantly, we learned to adapt. Korthok studied the images. All species adapt or die. Not like us. Day One's voice grew intense. We went from first flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. We went from splitting the atom to fusion reactors in less than a century. We survived extinction-level asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, world wars that killed millions. And we kept going. We kept learning. We kept adapting. He pulled up more recent data. Your files show our current technology. But do they show our rate of advancement? Do they show that human innovation accelerates exponentially? That what takes other species centuries to develop, we do in decades? Korthok's expression shifted. He began accessing his own databases, cross-referencing the information. His eyes widened slightly. You see it now, Day One said. The Talvesh Dominion has been a spacefaring civilization for 3,000 years. Humanity achieved the same level of technology in 300. We're not just advancing, Admiral. We're exploding forward. He brought up another display. And here's what your files probably don't show. This ship, the Times Eternal Horizon Asterisk, carries enough scientific equipment to level a city if we reprogrammed it for destruction. Our research into gravitational physics could become gravitational weapons. Our medical facilities have equipment that could engineer biological agents. Our reactor, which Bora pushed to 340%, could be overloaded deliberately to create a blast that would take out a dozen of your ships. Day One let that sink in. Every human civilian ship is potentially a warship. Every scientist is potentially a weapons designer. Every engineer is potentially a combat specialist. Because we don't see hard lines between peace and war. We see resources that can be repurposed, knowledge that can be applied differently, tools that serve whatever purpose we need. Korthok was silent, processing this information. His tactical mind was already running scenarios, calculating what it would mean to face an enemy where every ship was unpredictable, where civilian vessels could become deadly threats, where the entire population thought like asymmetric warfare specialists. You're trying to frighten me, the Admiral said finally. I'm trying to inform you. Day One's voice was calm. Fear is just your reaction to new information. The Talvesh have never faced an enemy like humanity because we don't fight like anyone else. We can't match your numbers or your military tradition. So we don't try. We innovate instead. We innovate. Dr. Hana's voice came over the channel. Captain, With your permission? Day One nodded. Go ahead. Hana appeared on the display next to Day One. Admiral Korthok. I'm Dr. Hana, Chief Science Officer. I've been studying your species since we intercepted your ultimatum. May I share some observations? The Admiral gestured for her to continue. The Talvesh have conquered 17 species over 3,000 years. All of them fought traditional military engagements against you. All of them lost. Hana pulled up battle records from the Dominion's own archives. Your tactics are efficient. Your discipline is perfect. Your logistics are flawless. You're exceptional at conventional warfare. She highlighted specific patterns. But every battle followed the same structure. Fleet engagements in open space. Direct confrontation. Clear objectives. Your entire military doctrine assumes the enemy will fight you on your terms. And humanity will not, Korthok said. Humanity can't. Hana corrected. We're too new to space. Too outnumbered. Too outgunned. Fighting you conventionally would be suicide. So we'll fight unconventionally. And that's the part your 3,000 years of experience hasn't prepared you for. She brought up human history. We have extensive experience fighting asymmetric conflicts on our own planet. Smaller forces defeating larger ones through creativity, unpredictability, and sheer stubbornness. We know how to turn disadvantages into advantages. We know how to make every casualty so expensive that victory becomes Pyrrhic. Korthok leaned forward. You are saying that even if we conquer human space, it will cost us dearly. I'm saying it will cost you more than you can imagine, Hana replied. Because you won't just be fighting warships. You'll be fighting every human you encounter. The merchant who rigs his cargo hauler to explode. The colonist who turns farming equipment into weapons. The scientists who engineer diseases specifically targeting Talvesh biology. The engineers who sabotage your supply lines. The children who grow up learning to hate you and spend their entire lives finding new ways to resist. She paused. You'll win battles. You might even occupy our worlds. But you'll never truly conquer us. And every day you try will cost you ships, soldiers, and resources. For how long? Decades? Centuries? How much of the Dominion's strength will you sacrifice for 6-star systems? The silence stretched between them. Admiral Korthok's face was difficult to read, but his body language suggested he was deeply troubled. Your demonstration, he said slowly. The asteroid field, the gravitational weapon, the reactor output. That was not just showing off your capabilities. No, Day One said. It was showing you how humans think. We took a research vessel unarmed, unarmored, designed for peaceful exploration, and turned it into something that made 300 warships pause. We didn't add weapons. We didn't call for reinforcements. We just used what we had in ways you didn't expect. He stood up. Now, imagine millions of humans, all thinking like that. All looking at every resource, every tool, every piece of technology, and asking, how can I use this to fight back? You'll face enemies in ways you can't predict, using tactics you can't counter, because we're not following any playbook. We're writing new rules as we go. Bora's voice joined the conversation. And we'll keep getting better at it. Every battle you win teaches us more. Every tactic you use gets analyzed, countered, and turned against you. You have 3,000 years of military tradition. We have 300 years of learning to adapt faster than anyone thought possible. Taeyang added quietly. The asteroid run I just performed? I trained for similar maneuvers for 3 years. But younger pilots are already learning techniques that make mine look simple. Human skill compounds. In a long war, your experienced soldiers get tired and die. Ours get experienced and teach the next generation to be even better. Admiral Korthok sat in silence, looking at the 4 humans on his screen. A captain, a scientist, an engineer, and a navigator. None of them soldiers by training, all of them deadly in their own ways. What do you want, Captain Day One? He asked, finally. I want you to go back to the Dominion Council. Day One said. I want you to tell them exactly what you saw here today. I want you to explain that humanity isn't like the other species you've conquered. And I want you to recommend negotiation instead of invasion. And if I don't, then you'll fight a war like no other in Talvesh history. You'll win battles and lose the peace. You'll occupy territory and never control it. You'll sacrifice resources and gain nothing worth the cost. Day One's voice was absolutely certain. And in the end, whether it takes years or centuries, humanity will still be here, adapting, growing, becoming stronger, until the day comes when we're not the ones on the defensive anymore. The weight of those words settled over the conversation like a heavy blanket. The communication ended. Admiral Korthok sat alone in his command chamber, staring at the blank view screen where the human captain had been moments before. 300 warships waited for his orders. The Dominion Council expected a report on the invasion timeline. Instead, Korthok was thinking about a small research vessel and its crew of 43. He pulled up the footage from the demonstration again. Watched the impossible navigation through the asteroid field. Studied the casual way the humans had weaponized peaceful technology. Examined the biometric data showing stress levels that suggested this had been routine for them. His tactical officer entered the chamber. Admiral, the Council is requesting an update. Tell them I will contact them shortly. Korthak continued studying the data. First, I want you to run a simulation. Sir, assume a war with humanity. Full invasion of the 6 disputed systems. Use our current fleet strength and their known military capabilities. But factor in the following variables. He pulled up the notes he'd been making. Assume every civilian vessel can be weaponized. Assume unconventional tactics at every engagement. Assume continuous innovation and adaptation from human forces. Assume no possibility of true surrender or occupation without constant resistance. The tactical officer's face grew troubled. Admiral, those variables make accurate simulation nearly impossible. I know. Do your best. The officer left. Korthok sat in silence, knowing what the simulation would show. Oh. The Talvesh would win the initial engagements. They would conquer the disputed systems. But the cost would be high, and the occupation would be endless. Resources drained fighting insurgents. Ships destroyed by civilian vessels turned into improvised weapons. Soldiers killed by enemies who didn't follow any conventional doctrine. And worst of all, he would be teaching humanity how to fight. Every battle would be a lesson. Every tactic would be studied and countered. The humans would learn from their defeats faster than the Talvesh could exploit their victories. It was a war that could only end one way. Pyrrhic victory turning into eventual defeat. Korthak made his decision. He opened a channel to the Dominion Council. 12 species were represented on the council, all conquered and absorbed into the Talvesh hierarchy. They appeared on his screens, ready to hear of humanity's imminent destruction. Council members, Korthak began. I am sending you complete footage and data from my encounter with a human vessel at Kepler 442. I recommend you review it before we continue this conversation. There is nothing to review, the council chairman said. You have 300 warships. They have nothing. Begin the invasion. Free. We. Watch the footage, Korthak said firmly. Then we will discuss. The council members, surprised by his tone, agreed. Korthak waited as they reviewed everything. He watched their expressions change from confidence to confusion to growing concern. When they reconvened, the chairman spoke carefully. This vessel performed impressive maneuvers. But it is still only one ship. That is precisely the point, Korthak replied. One unarmed research vessel. One crew of scientists and explorers. No military training, no combat experience, no weapons designed for warfare. And they made my entire fleet hesitate. He pulled up the biometric data. Look at their stress levels. They were performing maneuvers that should be impossible, and their vital signs barely elevated. This is normal for them. They thrive under pressure. The council members studied the data in silence. I have commanded fleets for 40 years, Korthok continued. I have conquered 12 worlds. I know warfare. And I am telling you that fighting humanity would be unlike anything the Dominion has ever faced. He shared his tactical assessment. They will not fight us fleet to fleet. They will turn every ship into a weapon, every colony into a fortress, every citizen into a soldier. They will innovate faster than we can adapt. They will study our tactics and counter them. They will make every victory cost more than it is worth. Rambadi. Increase. The council chairman looked troubled. Are you saying the mighty Talvesh Dominion should fear a species that has barely left its home world? I am saying we should respect them, Korthok corrected. There is a difference between fear and wisdom. The wise predator does not attack prey that will cost more to kill than it provides in food. He brought up the comparison data Hana had provided. Humanity went from first flight to faster-than-light travel in 3 centuries. It took us 3,000 years. Their rate of advancement is exponential. In a century, they may match our technology. In 2 centuries, they may surpass it. Korthok let that sink in. We can fight them now and suffer heavy losses for marginal gains. Or we can negotiate, establish peaceful relations, and avoid making an enemy of what may become the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members argued for immediate invasion, claiming the Dominion could not show weakness. Others saw the logic in Korthok's assessment. The footage of the Times Eternal Horizons Times demonstration played repeatedly, each viewing making the implications clearer. Finally, the council reached a decision. The chairman spoke. Admiral Korthok, you are authorized to open negotiations with humanity. The invasion is postponed indefinitely. We will propose a non-aggression pact and discuss the disputed territories through diplomatic channels. Korthok felt relief wash over him. A wise decision. Council members. Korthok. Do not mistake this for weakness, Admiral. We are simply choosing our battles carefully. As all wise commanders should, the Times Eternal Horizon Times waited in space, maintaining position near the asteroid field. The crew had no idea what was happening in the Talvesh fleet, but they remained at their stations, ready for whatever came next. Captain, Taeyang said suddenly, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Korthok. Day 1 straightened in his chair. On screen, the Admiral appeared. And for the first time, his expression was something other than cold calculation. He looked almost respectful. Captain Day 1, I have consulted with the Dominion Council. We have decided to withdraw our fleet and our ultimatum. The Talvesh Dominion wishes to open diplomatic negotiations with humanity regarding the disputed systems. The bridge of the Times Eternal Horizon Times erupted in barely contained celebration. Day 1 kept his composure, though relief flooded through him. That is welcome news, Admiral. I believe our governments can reach an understanding that benefits both our species. I believe so as well. Korthok paused. Captain, I have one question for you. Yes? Were you truly prepared to die here today if I had refused? Daewon considered the question. Yes. But I was also prepared to take several of your ships with us. As I said, Las Prakis. Humans are good at improvising. Korthok made that sound that might have been laughter again. I think humanity and the Talvesh may become allies someday, Captain. Your species is irritating, unpredictable, and dangerous, but also fascinating. I'll take that as a compliment, Admiral. It was intended as one. Korthok's expression grew serious. Your demonstration today may have prevented a war that would have cost millions of lives on both sides. That is worth remembering. Then perhaps we should remember it together, Daewon suggested, as the beginning of understanding rather than the prelude to conflict. The Talvesh fleet began to withdraw, 300 warships turning in perfect formation and heading back toward Dominion space. The Times Eternal Horizon Times remained where it was, a tiny speck against the stars. having accomplished what should have been impossible. 18 hours later, the crew finally allowed themselves to believe it was over. The common area filled with exhausted, relieved people, sharing stories of the craziest day of their lives. Bo-Ra raised a cup of terrible ship coffee and a toast. To the most insane thing we've ever done. We've tended to sane, to never doing it again, Hana added. To Captain Day One, Tae-young said. For being just crazy enough to make it work, Day One smiled. To all of you. For following me into something that should have gotten us killed. They drank their coffee and tried to process what they'd accomplished. 1 research vessel, 43 crew members, no weapons. And they'd stopped an invasion. 3 weeks later, the Times Eternal Horizon Times docked at Earth Station Prime. They expected a quiet return, maybe a debriefing with command. Instead, they found a media storm, government officials, and a celebration that lasted for days. Captain Day One was offered a promotion to Admiral, command of the entire exploration fleet. His choice of assignments. He turned them all down and requested to remain captain of the Times Eternal Horizon *. Exploration is where humans belong, he told the admirals, but we'll always be ready to defend it. Hana became the leading expert on Talvesh culture and headed the diplomatic team for the negotiations. The non-aggression pact was signed within 6 months. The disputed systems were designated as neutral territory, open to both species for peaceful development. Bo-Ra received offers from every military contractor and shipyard in human space. She accepted a teaching position instead, training the next generation of engineers in the art of creative problem-solving under pressure. Tae-young, at 23 years old, became the youngest person ever to receive their own command. He chose an exploration vessel, following in his captain's footsteps. 6 months after the incident at Kepler 442, a Talavesh cultural exchange program sent students to study on Earth. One of them asked a human professor a question that had been bothering the young alien. Why do humans name their military vessels after concepts like hope, freedom, and discovery? Our warships have names that mean destroyer, conqueror, annihilator. Your ships have names that speak of peace. The professor, who had served under Admiral Korthak and witnessed the Times Eternal Horizons Times demonstration, smiled. Because we don't need threatening names. A species that names their vessels after hope and exploration, yet can turn them into weapons in an instant that's far more terrifying than any warship. We choose peace. We prefer peace. But we're always capable of war, and that's what makes us dangerous. 1. The student thought about this. So the name Times Eternal Horizon Times was a message? Everything about that ship was a message. The name, the mission, the crew. It told us that humanity looks forward, not backward. They explore, not conquer. But if you threaten them, they'll use those same ships, those same explorers, those same peaceful tools, and become something you can't predict or stop. The professor pulled up footage of the Times Eternal Horizon *, now famous across both human and Talvesh space. The small research vessel hung in dock, being prepared for its next mission. That ship prevented a war, the professor said quietly. Not by being the strongest or the most heavily armed, but by showing us what humanity truly is: adaptive, creative, relentless, and absolutely, completely unpredictable. The Times Eternal Horizon Times launched 3 days later on a new survey mission to unexplored systems. Captain Day One stood on the bridge, watching the stars slide past as they accelerated to jump speed. Course laid in, Captain, Tae-young's replacement reported. Ready to jump on your command. Day One smiled. Then let's go see what's out there. After all, that's what explorers do. The ship jumped, leaving Earth behind, heading out into the unknown. Because humanity never stopped exploring. And the galaxy was slowly learning that humanity's explorers were just as dangerous as their soldiers, maybe more so.